They told the Germans to deploy their ultimate nightmare: steel monsters, tiger tanks. The kind of machines that made entire armies freeze before firing a single shot. On paper, this should have been a massacre. One tiger could punch through American armor like it was cardboard. Its gun was louder, thicker, deadlier. Its reputation alone was enough to make men panic. So when dozens of tigers rolled into the battlefield, everyone expected the same ending: American tanks burning, retreat orders, another German victory carved into history. But that's not what happened. Instead, something went horribly wrong. Tigers started dying. Not one or two, dozens. Crews abandoned perfectly good machines. Fuel ran out, engines failed, command broke down. And the scariest part? The Americans didn't even try to outgun the Tigers. They didn't need better tanks. They didn't need miracles. They needed a mindset. Because this wasn't a battle of armor, it was a battle of speed, pressure, and ruthless decision-making. And behind it all was one man who believed something insane: that a weaker force, moving fast enough, could destroy the strongest weapon ever built. This is the story of how invincible machines were hunted, broken, and erased, not by power, but by strategy. Type Part 1 when you're ready. By 1944, the Tiger tank wasn't just a weapon, it was a legend. German propaganda had turned it into a rolling god, a steel beast with armor so thick Allied shells bounced off like pebbles. An 88mm gun that could kill from distances American crews didn't even think about fighting from. If you were inside a Sherman and someone whispered, "Tiger," your stomach dropped instantly. And honestly, that fear wasn't fake. On paper, the Tiger outclassed everything the Americans had. Thicker armor, bigger gun, longer kill range, deadlier first shot. One Tiger could wipe out multiple Shermans before they even saw it. So when U.S. intelligence confirmed that entire German heavy tank units were moving into the sector, American commanders knew this wasn't just another skirmish. This was a test of whether speed and numbers could survive against raw power. But here's what most people don't understand. The Tiger wasn't built for war the way war actually works. It was built for dominance, not endurance. Each Tiger weighed over 57 tons. That meant weak bridges, muddy roads, and tight villages were basically death traps. Fuel consumption was insane. Spare parts were rare. Repairs took forever. If a Tiger broke down, there was a good chance it was abandoned and blown up by its own crew. German engineers had built a monster, but monsters are slow, and slow things bleed. Meanwhile, American Shermans were the opposite: lighter, faster, easier to fix, easier to replace. Individually, a Sherman versus a Tiger was suicide. But war isn't fought one-on-one, and that's where German confidence started to crack. German commanders believed the myth too much. They assumed Americans would retreat the moment Tigers appeared. They expected fear to do half the work for them. So they pushed forward aggressively, deep, heavy, and overconfident. What they didn't see was what American commanders were quietly changing behind the lines. They stopped thinking in terms of tank duels. They started thinking like hunters. The battlefield wasn't about who had the bigger gun anymore. It was about who controlled movement, timing, and pressure. And while the Tigers rolled forward like kings, the trap was already forming. The first Tiger rolled into view just after sunrise. Not fast, not loud, just heavy. Its tracks crushed the frozen mud like bones under boots. The German crew didn't rush. They never rushed. They believed nothing on earth could touch them. And honestly, most days, they were right. The villagers hid. The trees stood still. Even the birds dipped out. Inside the American position, nobody spoke. You could hear breathing, gloves tightening, a cigarette snapped in half instead of being lit. Then someone whispered, "Tiger." Damn. Everyone knew the stats: front armor thick enough to laugh at shells, gun powerful enough to erase a tank with one shot. And today, there wasn't just one. A second Tiger emerged, then a third. Steel monsters, perfect formation, cold confidence. The Americans were outgunned, out-armored, out-everything. But the man leading them didn't move. He didn't shout orders, didn't panic, didn't flinch. He just watched. He'd fought before, in places worse than this, against men who thought they were untouchable too, and every time the same rule applied. Machines don't win wars. Decisions do. He waited. The Tigers rolled closer, barrels scanning. Their commanders searched for targets, trenches, guns, tanks. What they didn't look for was a man who planned to let them pass. The first Tiger crossed the invisible line. Still no shot. The German crew relaxed, smirks inside the steel box. They thought the Americans were scared, frozen. That's when the trap snapped shut. A single shot cracked the air, not from the front, but from the side. Then another, then another. The ground exploded, smoke rose. One Tiger lurched, its track blown clean off. The beast didn't die, but it couldn't move. The second Tiger tried to turn, too slow. A shell slammed into its thinner side armor. The crew inside didn't even have time to scream. The third Tiger backed up, panic finally replacing confidence. But now, the Americans were everywhere. Angles, crossfire, timing. Not brute force, brains. The Germans had better tanks. The Americans had better positioning. And in war, that difference gets people buried. The surviving Tiger fired wildly, shell ripping through trees, dirt, bodies. But it didn't matter. The battlefield had flipped. And the man leading the Americans, still calm, still silent. Because this wasn't luck. This was designed, and the Germans were about to learn something painful. Legends don't survive ambushes. Smoke swallowed the field. Not movie smoke, real smoke. Thick, bitter, burning your lungs every time you breathed. The kind that sticks to your clothes and follows you home, if you're lucky enough to go home. The disabled Tiger still sat there, engine coughing like a dying animal. Inside it, the German crew was alive. Barely. They pounded on the steel from the inside, shouting orders, screaming for support, begging the radio for help that wasn't coming. Their tank, the symbol of German dominance, had become a coffin with a view. The American leader watched it through binoculars. He lowered them slowly. "No rush," he said. "Calm, flat. Let it cook." That's war logic, cold, ugly, necessary. The Germans outside the tank tried to react. Infantry rushed forward, firing blindly into the smoke. Bullets cracked past helmets. Dirt kicked up. A man went down screaming, clutching his leg like it was falling apart in his hands. The Americans didn't break formation. They moved like shadows, short runs, clean drops, controlled fire. No hero moves, no yelling, just survival instincts sharpened by too many funerals. Then the radio crackled. Enemy reinforcements spotted. More armor, Panzer IVs this time. Faster, weaker, but still deadly. This wasn't over. The leader crouched behind a shattered wall, maps spread over the mud. Fingers traced lines like he was playing chess instead of fighting for his life. "They'll come straight," someone said. "They always do." He nodded. "Then we make straight deadly." Orders went out, quiet, fast, precise. Shift guns, reset angles, save ammo. No speeches, no hype, because men don't need motivation when death is 10 seconds away. The Panzer IVs appeared, engines screaming. They charged, desperate to recover pride, desperate to erase what they'd just witnessed. That desperation killed them. The Americans waited until the last second. Boom! A Panzer exploded, turret flipping like a coin in the air. Boom! Another burned, crew scrambling out only to be cut down before they hit the ground. The Germans finally understood. This wasn't a lucky defense. This was a hunter's ground. The battlefield echoed with metal tearing apart, screams mixing with fire, commands dissolving into chaos, and through all of it, the American leader moved forward. Not hiding, not rushing, just walking. A sniper tried to line him up, missed. A shell landed close enough to knock him flat. He got up anyway. Mud on his face, blood on his sleeve, not all his, because fear had stopped working on him a long time ago. He'd already lost everything that could be taken, and that made him dangerous. By nightfall, the field was silent. Burned tanks, scattered bodies, broken trees. Victory didn't feel like victory. It never does. The men gathered around him, waiting for the next order. He looked at the flames dying in the distance and said one thing: "They'll come again." And everyone knew he was right.
Morning came slow. Not sunrise beautiful, not peaceful, just gray light crawling over wreckage. The battlefield looked frozen, burned steel, twisted guns, bodies lying exactly where fear dropped them. Crows circled overhead like they already knew the schedule. The Germans found the field first. A reconnaissance unit moved in carefully, boots crunching over metal fragments and bone. These weren't rookies. These were veterans, men who'd seen Russia, Africa, France. And even they felt it. Something was wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. They stopped near the destroyed Tiger. Blackened armor, melted tracks, bullet scars everywhere. But no chaos, no panic firing, no desperate last stand signs. This wasn't a battlefield. This was an execution site. One of the Germans muttered, "Americans." Another shook his head, "Not normal ones." They found the shell casings next, carefully placed, measured distances, firing lanes overlapping like blueprints. That's when the radio crackled. Command wanted answers. Who did this? How many? What unit? The recon leader swallowed. "We don't know," he said, "but they didn't fight like soldiers." Pause. They fought like hunters. By noon, the story spread. A single American unit, outnumbered, cut off, no armor support. And yet, they erased a Tiger, wiped a Panzer push, and vanished without losses that made sense. German officers didn't like stories like that. Stories make men think. Thinking slows obedience. So command changed tactics. No more frontal attacks, no more rushing. They sent specialists, snipers, counter-snipers, veterans trained specifically to kill men who don't miss. And they had one instruction: find the American who leads them. That American was already moving. His unit never stayed still, never slept in the same place twice. They moved at night, hid by day, ate cold, spoke in whispers. He didn't give speeches. He didn't promise survival. He just kept them alive, and that was enough. A German sniper finally got eyes on him near a ruined farmhouse. Perfect angle, clean line, wind steady. The sniper squeezed. Click. Nothing. The rifle jammed. The American turned his head, just slightly, like he felt the shot coming before it existed. One single gunshot echoed. The German sniper never heard it. That night, German command intercepted a report from a shaken lieutenant. "Sir, the men won't advance." Why? They believe the American is still there. Command snapped back. Belief doesn't stop bullets. The lieutenant answered quietly, "No, sir, but fear does." By now, the Americans had a nickname among German ranks. They didn't know his real name, so they made one up. A name whispered in bunkers. A name passed through trenches like a curse. The Walking Death. And the man himself? He never knew. He just checked his rifle, adjusted his map, and prepared for what always came next. Because when the enemy stops charging, they start planning something worse. German command stopped improvising. Fear had spread too far. Stories were moving faster than orders. Units hesitated. Convoys slowed. Officers started checking shadows before checking maps. That couldn't continue. So they built a trap. Not a rushed one, not emotional. Cold, precise, professional. They picked the valley because it forced movement. Narrow ground, broken stone walls, tree lines tight enough to hide armor, but open enough to kill anything caught inside. They leaked information. A supply convoy, fuel, ammunition, dump. Exactly the kind of target the Americans had been hitting. Exactly the kind of bait you couldn't ignore. 3 Tiger tanks were positioned hull down at the far end of the valley. Their guns covered every possible approach. Infantry filled the woods. Machine gun nests overlapped. Snipers were placed with clear lines of fire. And behind it all, artillery already zeroed in. The Germans waited. They didn't have to wait long. Just after dusk, movement. Shadows sliding through trees. Boots careful, slow, silent. The Americans had come. German fingers tightened on triggers. This time there would be no escape. The first American stepped into the valley. Nothing happened. The second, still nothing. Command waited for the perfect moment when the whole unit was in the kill zone. That moment never came, because the Americans stopped, right at the edge. Too disciplined, too calm. Then something went wrong. A flare suddenly ignited, but not from the American side, from behind the German infantry. White light flooded the trees. Gunfire erupted, German rifles firing at shapes that weren't there. Confusion spread instantly. That's when the explosions started. Not inside the valley, on the supply trucks. The bait burned first. Fuel tanks erupted into fireballs. Ammunition cooked off like popcorn. Shock waves rattled the Tigers in their positions. The Americans had never entered the trap. They had circled it. The first Tiger tried to rotate its turret. Too slow. A shaped charge slammed into its side armor. Boom. The second Tiger fired blindly, its shell tearing through empty ground where Americans had been expected minutes earlier. Then artillery hit. Not German, American. Shells rained into the valley from angles the Germans hadn't even considered. Their own trap turned into a coffin. Machine gun nests were buried. Infantry scattered. Radios screamed with overlapping orders. The third Tiger tried to reverse. The engine stalled. A single American moved through the smoke, calm as if walking a street back home. He placed the charge carefully. Not rushed, not angry, just finished the job. The blast flipped the Tiger onto its side like a toy. By the time German command realized what had happened, it was already over. The Americans vanished again, same as before. No pursuit, no counterattack, just silence. German casualty reports came in through the night. Lost armor, destroyed supplies, dozens dead, 0 confirmed American bodies. A major finally said what everyone was thinking. We didn't set a trap for them. They used our trap to kill us. That's when orders changed. No more hunting, no more traps. New instructions went out across the sector. If contact is made with the American unit, withdraw. Not reposition, not reinforce, withdraw. The legend wasn't just alive now. It was controlling the battlefield. And the man leading them? He knew exactly what came next. When an enemy stops chasing, they bring something bigger, something desperate, something meant to erase everything. German command stopped improvising. Fear had spread too far. Stories were moving faster than orders. Units hesitated. Convoys slowed. Officers started checking shadows before checking maps. That couldn't continue. So they built a trap. Not a rushed one, not emotional. Cold, precise, professional. They picked the valley because it forced movement. Narrow ground, broken stone walls, tree lines tight enough to hide armor, but open enough to kill anything caught inside. They leaked information. A supply convoy, fuel, ammunition, dump. Exactly the kind of target the Americans had been hitting. Exactly the kind of bait you couldn't ignore. 3 Tiger tanks were positioned hull down at the far end of the valley. Their guns covered every possible approach. Infantry filled the woods. Machine gun nests overlapped. Snipers were placed with clear lines of fire. And behind it all, artillery already zeroed in. The Germans waited. They didn't have to wait long. Just after dusk, movement. Shadows sliding through trees. Boots careful, slow, silent. The Americans had come. German fingers tightened on triggers. This time there would be no escape. The first American stepped into the valley. Nothing happened. The second, still nothing. Command waited for the perfect moment when the whole unit was in the kill zone. That moment never came, because the Americans stopped, right at the edge. Too disciplined, too calm. Then something went wrong. A flare suddenly ignited, but not from the American side, from behind the German infantry. White light flooded the trees. Gunfire erupted. German rifles firing at shapes that weren't there. Confusion spread instantly. That's when the explosion started. Not inside the valley, on the supply trucks. The bait burned first. Fuel tanks erupted into fireballs. Ammunition cooked off like popcorn. Shockwaves rattled the Tigers in their positions. The Americans had never entered the trap.
They had circled it. The first Tiger tried to rotate its turret. Too slow. A shaped charge slammed into its side armor. Boom! The second Tiger fired blindly, its shell tearing through empty ground where Americans had been expected minutes earlier. Then artillery hit. Not German, American. Shells rained into the valley from angles the Germans hadn't even considered. Their own trap turned into a coffin. Machine gun nests were buried, infantry scattered, radio screamed with overlapping orders. The third Tiger tried to reverse. The engine stalled. A single American moved through the smoke, calm as if walking a street back home. He placed the charge carefully, not rushed, not angry, just finished the job. The blast flipped the Tiger onto its side like a toy. By the time German command realized what had happened, it was already over. The Americans vanished again, same as before. No pursuit, no counterattack, just silence. German casualty reports came in through the night. Lost armor, destroyed supplies, dozens dead, 0 confirmed American bodies. A major finally said what everyone was thinking. We didn't set a trap for them. They used our trap to kill us. That's when orders changed. No more hunting, no more traps. New instructions went out across the sector. If contact is made with the American unit, withdraw. Not reposition, not reinforce, withdraw. The legend wasn't just alive now, it was controlling the battlefield. And the man leading them, he knew exactly what came next. When an enemy stops chasing, they bring something bigger, something desperate, something meant to erase everything. German high command wasn't done yet. They had lost dozens of Tigers, entire supply convoys, and morale was crumbling. But desperation is dangerous. Desperation breeds boldness. So they gathered what remained. A small battalion of the fastest Tigers left, only 8 operational tanks, accompanied by elite Panzer Grenadiers, infantry trained to protect these monsters, to guide them, to win back what had already slipped from their hands. Orders were simple: stop Patton, halt the advance, hold the road. This time they chose terrain that should have favored them: rolling hills, hedgerows, and a narrow bridge over the river.
Any force advancing here would be predictable. Any mistake would be catastrophic. The Americans knew the trap could exist. Patton's scouts had spotted movements. The question wasn't if they would face it, but when. The Shermans moved in columns, deliberately slow, appearing vulnerable. Artillery covered flanks. Tanks stayed in motion. Fighter bombers circled overhead, ready to strike at first sign of a German aggression. And then the Tigers hit. At first, it looked like disaster. The 8 monsters opened fire, 88mm rounds punching through hedgerows, crushing Shermans. Infantry tried to advance under covering fire, but machine guns swept the fields. A few American tanks were destroyed, flames erupted, smoke curled into the sky. But still, the American advance didn't stop. Shermans moved through open ground, using hedgerows as cover, while tank destroyers struck from unexpected angles. Infantry with bazookas and anti-tank guns flanked the positions. Tigers, designed to dominate open terrain, now found themselves in chaos. By nightfall, 5 of the 8 Tigers were destroyed or abandoned. The remaining 3 attempted withdrawal, but that was no escape. American tank destroyers and aircraft pursued relentlessly, firing from angles the Tigers couldn't protect, tracks disabled, engines overheated, crews forced out. The river bridge, supposed to be a bottleneck advantage, became a killing zone for the retreating German armor. One Tiger, attempting to cross, had its engine fail mid-span. The crew abandoned it. American infantry pushed forward, capturing its guns intact. By the time the Germans regrouped, the battalion was effectively annihilated. 8 Tigers sent to halt Patton, none remained in fighting condition. The battlefield was littered with wreckage. Fire burned into the night. Smoke drifted across the French countryside like a warning. Patton's army had moved forward without pause. His tempo, his coordination, and his refusal to fight on enemy terms had shattered Germany's elite armor again. The lesson was clear. Superior weapons cannot win if the operator is trapped by tactics. And the Germans learned a brutal truth that day. Patton doesn't stop. He doesn't wait, and he doesn't forgive mistakes. The road ahead, wide open, and Patton's advance, relentless. The smoke cleared. Fields, once dotted with hedgerows and tanks, now lay scarred by fire and wreckage. Shermans had survived. Tigers had not. Patton's Third Army pushed forward, unbroken, unstoppable. The myth of invincible German armor shattered in hours. Reports flooded in. Captured Tiger crews were bewildered. We expected the Americans to slow, to hesitate, to fear us, one officer admitted. Instead, they never stopped. We weren't fighting tanks. We were being hunted. Patton's staff mapped the destruction. 72 Tigers committed. Fewer than 10 survived. Hundreds of tons of Germany's most elite armor gone. Strategic positions meant to stall the Americans now lay wide open. Roads cleared, supply lines intact, villages liberated, resistance collapsing. And the psychological impact? Immense. German commanders were shaken. Soldiers who once revered the Tiger feared it. The superweapon that should have been unstoppable had failed under speed, coordination, and relentless pressure. Across the front, Patton's tactics became a case study. Artillery, air support, tank destroyers, and infantry, all moving as one unstoppable force. No hesitation, no pause, no retreat. The lesson was clear. Tempo kills, coordination kills, morale kills. Even the American tank crews learned something that day. Shermans, weak in armor, outgunned, and lightly protected, their effectiveness wasn't in their specs, their strength was in how they were used. Every maneuver, every flanking move, every burst of artillery support contributed to victory. Meanwhile, German command scrambled. Reinforcements tried to plug gaps, but Patton's forces moved faster than their intelligence could predict. Every defensive line they established crumbled. Roads that were supposed to delay the Americans became highways to retreat. Fuel shortages and mechanical failures compounded the collapse. By the end of the week, Patton's army had advanced further than any other Allied unit in France, capturing key towns, supply depots, and rail lines.
The myth of unstoppable German armor was broken, and the legend of Patton's speed and aggression was cemented. It wasn't luck, it wasn't miracles, it was tactics, preparation, and refusal to fight on the enemy's terms. Every Sherman that survived, every flanking maneuver that hit the weak side armor, every bomb dropped on a Tiger track, every shell landing on a German position, all part of a machine operating with relentless precision. And the Germans learned what historians would later call one of the most important lessons of World War II. Superior machines alone cannot win. Superior strategy, coordination, and tempo define the outcome. Patton didn't just destroy Tigers, he destroyed the myth that any weapon, no matter how powerful, was invincible. And with the road to Paris clear, the Allied advance became unstoppable. Patton's army moved like lightning across northern France, leaving chaos behind. Victory wasn't just measured in destroyed tanks, it was measured in freedom regained, morale shattered, and a battlefield rewritten by speed, coordination, and sheer American audacity. Patton had shown the world, you can't outgun a plan that moves faster than your weapons can react. The Germans never forgot that August. The Shermans would keep advancing. The Tigers, only a memory, burned into the fields of France. August 1944 wasn't just a battle, it was a lesson, a blueprint for modern warfare. Patton's Third Army hadn't just crushed German armor, they rewrote the rules of engagement. 72 Tigers, Germany's ultimate weapon, deployed to halt the American advance, expected to dominate, expected to intimidate. Instead, fewer than 10 survived. Roads lay open, towns liberated, resistance broken. The battlefield had been turned upside down by speed, coordination, and relentless pressure. Historians later called it a case study in tempo warfare. Patton's philosophy? Don't fight the enemy where he's strongest. Force him to fight on your terms and let his strengths become weaknesses. Tigers excelled in defensive, stationary positions. Patton refused to let them settle. He kept moving, he kept flanking, he kept pushing. The tanks that were supposed to stop him became trapped by their own limitations. The human factor mattered too. American crews, outgunned and out-armored, relied on training, teamwork, and courage. Artillery, air support, tank destroyers, and infantry, all moving as one, striking from multiple angles, leaving the Germans unable to adapt. Superior technology could not compensate for a lack of preparation, coordination, or morale. The impact was immediate. German tank crews who once worshipped the Tiger's invincibility now feared it. The myth was gone. Patton's name, already feared, became legendary among both allies and enemies. His approach didn't just win battles, it shattered illusions of technological invincibility. And for the Allies, a morale boost unlike any other. Shermans weren't just surviving, they were thriving when used correctly. American soldiers understood that victories weren't dictated by hardware alone. Planning, speed, and aggression could turn even inferior machines into unstoppable forces. The Tigers' defeat in France became a textbook example. Commanders around the world studied it. Militaries learned that superior machines fail without support and coordination. Speed and tempo disrupt even the best defenses. Psychology, morale, and pressure are as lethal as firepower. Patton didn't just move armies, he moved the rules of warfare forward. The lessons from August 1944 resonated through subsequent campaigns, influencing tactics from Normandy to the Rhine. By the time Paris was liberated, the world understood something crucial. Technology alone doesn't win wars. Leadership, strategy, and relentless execution do. 72 Tigers sent to stop one man's advance. Fewer than 10 survived. Patton never looked back. The road ahead was wide open, paved with courage, coordination, and American ingenuity. And the lesson endures. Never let your enemy fight the battle he wants. Fight the battle that ensures your victory. The battlefield may change, machines may evolve, but the principle remains timeless. Patton's Third Army had proved it, and history never forgot.